Well, hey everybody, we're here this afternoon with Devin Fox from Great Commission Bible Institute. Most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with Devin and the ministry just up the road from us now.
Oh.
Used to be here in this room,
Oh.
and is now elsewhere.
Yeah, on a lake
On a lake.
in the 1,000-degree weather.
Must be nice.
The lake's nice. The weather is humid.
Yeah. Well, Devin, thanks so much for being with us this
man.
afternoon as we talk through kind of Esther Part 2. Last week, Pastor Michael Lockstamper and I walked through sort of the first part of the book of Esther and kind of setting up how to, I guess in Esther's case, how to kind of make the best out of, the hand that you're dealt.
Yeah.
She was put
Crummy
in a
situation.
well, not just crummy, like she was put in a morally compromising situation that was outside of her control. And we're going to see here in the second half how she kind of found herself through what seemed like a set of really bad circumstances in a position to do something for God and his people that she never could have imagined. So
Yeah, for sure. I think taking the bad hand that is dealt and actually allowing God to use it and allowing God to use you is one of the big takeaways from just Esther's life in general. It's like, okay, God, I don't know what you want me to do here. I don't know why you've put me in this position, but I know you have, so what do I do?
yeah,
Yeah.
kind of now what?
Yeah.
Well, take us through. You've you teach this book along with
65 others
most of the rest of them out at the Bible Institute. So kind of, and I know we're sort of picking up in the middle of the book here,
Sure.
but what are some of the things that you really try to make sure that the students get from this book?
Yeah, there is the theme goes throughout, especially the Old Testament, but throughout the book of Esther of really understanding who's in charge and who's not in charge. The first chapter of Genesis, verse 1, makes it very clear. But I think Esther's book also makes it very clear that it's God's story. We're just kind of part of it. And that's a hard thing, especially in the culture that we live in, right? Like, I like control. I like to be in control. That's why I hate roller coasters. I don't like to not be in control of my life. I hate when my wife drives because it's like I can't control it. I think we're going to hit a mailbox. Which is not even true. But I like the control element. And what Esther makes painfully clear is you do not have control of maybe the circumstances and situations that you get put in, but you do have the opportunity and the choice and the actions to what you do with that. So that's really kind of what we try to hit on, especially in Esther, is God's going to tell a story and you get a small part to play. It's important that you play your part.
Yeah. Your brother sent me a picture of a meme last night. I guess he doesn't know how to send them, so he sent me a screen grab of one.
Yeah, not a shocker. Yeah.
But
technology's hard.
You know this guy, but but it was this picture of David and Goliath, and it says Goliath, and then next to David it says not you.
Yeah, right.
and that is so true.
People on the other side.
And we've talked about this, kind of from one of Matt Chandler's famous sermons, that you're not David.
Yeah.
But this idea that we, especially as Americans, we love the idea that we're the hero of the story.
Yeah.
We read a book like Esther, and we want to see. We want to try to understand how we're like Esther, or we're like Mordecai, or whoever we consider to be the hero, how we're that guy. When in reality, we're probably, like we talked last week with Pastor Michael, we're probably more like Haman.
Well, yeah, and I think a lot of times we're the people on the outside trying to especially with the David and Goliath story, we're probably the Israelites standing on the sideline, or Saul, quivering in fear. Be like, God, okay, we're not even focused on God. I'm just focused on the problem at hand.
Yeah.
And I think that is, unfortunately, the role that we play often is not necessarily the role that we think we're in.
That's very true.
But yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, and I think, as you look over, as Haman, gets free reign over just doing whatever, as Artaxerxes is held up with some other things, and he's just signing off and saying, all right, do what you want to do. Esther is really faced with that dilemma of, okay, I'm in this position of power. God, I really don't want to lose my life, but what am I really called to do with it? And I know for probably a lot of us, we don't necessarily feel like we're in a position of power at all. But when we do have a position or a part to play, what are we going to do with that part? And I don't think we're Esther in this story. I don't think we're God in this story. I don't think we're, but I think we do learn the characteristics of like, okay.
Is it possible this story's not about me?
Maybe, it might just be to kind of learn some things from the choices and actions of the people, to say, okay, this is how they acted. How do I apply that to my life when I'm faced with certain situations or circumstances? Now I think we all can say this is pretty heavy, pretty high up there situation. But at the same time, I think the choices and how she makes the choices and how she is kind of led in those choices with counsel, and there's just so much good stuff in it.
Well, we see in chapter 4, Mordecai. Do you have any clarity on the position Mordecai had? He obviously had this position near the palace, where he just he could observe the coming and going. He foiled that assassination plot, which gave him this really cool immunity. It was like, hey, you can't just throw me in prison. I'm written down in that book. But so he catches wind of this plot. To expunge this possibly fanatic minority from the Medo-Persian Empire and or whichever empire. Just Medo-Persian or just Medes? Just Persians.
You get to the Persians, And specifically with Mordecai, we don't know his necessarily exact position or whatever, but he's clearly in the know, and he's clearly in an elevated position. Because of his standing and because of his testimony and because of his life, which is another element, I think, of the story is you've got a guy who has a proven track record, a testimony, a character that the king is going to take seriously. And I think that goes to the story, the same thing with Esther, the character and the personality, and just going through the first couple of chapters, you see her listening to authority, following the advice of godly people in her life that has actually gotten her to the position that she's in. And there's clearly the hand of God on her life, even though the word God is not in any of the text. That's the highlight of this, is it's God is actually working behind the scenes.
Well, and there's kind of this implication of God as they talk about God's people. The whole reason why not just Mordecai is a threat, but the whole Jewish people are a threat to order. Is because it's not just that Mordecai doesn't like Haman that he won't bow down. It's because he's Jewish. The fact that he's Jewish means he won't bow down because
he's got a standard. He's got a
serves a God that says, "Don't do that."
I'm not going to fall in line into that. And I think that's where you get with Mordecai as we set up chapter 4 and go into it. I mean, he's in the know and he hears about this and he makes it known to Esther. It's like, listen, this is where we're at right now. And her first response, and this is where I think we all can relate to Esther in a certain way. Her first response isn't necessarily the response that you think she's going to give.
What can I do?
So what do you want me to do about this? You go all the way down to 13 and you get the second reply. Then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, "Do not imagine that you are in the king's palace and can escape any more than all the Jews. For if you remain silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, and you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether you have not attained royalty for such a time as this." And this is a big pivotal point, not only in Esther's life, because I think we can, this is the verse that everybody clings to, is this is the pivotal one. But just the confidence of Mordecai knowing who his God is in the midst of all of this.
Well, in the faith, he says, listen, you don't have to do this.
God,
I hope
God
you
can
will
do whatever.
But God will say, because Mordecai knew God has a plan for Israel. God has promises to his people. He will deliver us one way or another.
You're in a position to be that person.
Don't you want to be part of God's deliverance?
Yeah, and that's the big part of it. I think is he's like, listen, I know who my God is. I know who He, and we can get so caught up in the busy everyday. I mean, COVID life, politics, and
Hashtag
whatever.
COVID life.
Yeah, I mean that's where we're at, and we can get so caught up, and it's like nobody's got a plan. No one has any idea. It's like no, God absolutely has a plan, and He is in complete control, even in the midst of chaos, even in the midst of it looking like nothing is going right. Mm-hmm. God is in complete control, and we can rely and have the confidence about that, which is where Mordecai was. He had no. Now he might die, right?
Yeah.
Esther might die.
Oh, he knew. Yeah, he knew. I mean, I'm a high-profile Jew.
Yeah.
I'm actually. He knew he was the target of the whole thing.
Sure.
He was the one that sparked it all off by
the burning and the.
Well, his whole. Hey, Haman.
Yeah. Right. But like everybody else here.
Yeah. He made a point of making sure Haman knew that he wasn't going to bow down. He knew his neck was going to be the first one on the chopping block, or I guess it was the
hanging block
end of the rope in this case. But yeah, I do love the difference in Esther's responses, where she says in verses 11 and 12, but as for me, I have not been called to come to the king these 30 days. And it's like, what can I do? Yeah. I'm just a small cog in a big machine here. Sure. Sure, I'm the king's wife. Well, one of.
Yeah. I'm a part of this.
She recognized it. Like, yeah, the king liked her when he wanted her. Mm-hmm. But let's face it, her position was not political.
No.
Yeah, in this,
and we've seen scenario. Already how he deals with his previous wife when she she doesn't necessarily toe the line that is expected. So I think a lot of that goes into it, mm-hmm. and Pastor Andy talks about it a lot too. Is our character is really what happens when we're squeezed, and what comes out is really who we are, mm-hmm. and that's the moment Esther is in. And I think honestly, on a macro level of where we're at right now, this is what you're starting to find out too. Is like this is who we really are when we're getting squeezed, when the pressure is on. Mm-hmm. What is our reaction? Yeah. What do we run to? I think unfortunately a lot of us get angry, a lot of us get frustrated, and I know that's me, mm-hmm. right? But she allows Mordecai to move her to a place of saying, like, you know what? I'm going to listen to wise counsel here, because her response is, okay, yeah, you're right. I mean,
yeah. And like she says here, okay, I'm going to fast, go. Yeah. Then I will go to the king, though it is against the law. Yeah. And if I perish, I perish. Yeah. She knew how she got into the position she was. What happened in the last one. Yeah. But I think too, and I think this is maybe, one small way. I know we started by saying we weren't going to put ourselves into this story.
Sure.
But I think one of the possible takeaways with the whole Esther thing is her unwillingness at the beginning. Maybe there was a connection between that, and obviously, we can speculate. We can't know. Yeah. But I just think of some people, maybe even myself at times, when we feel like I've been compromised in some way, maybe morally compromised, maybe whatever. It's just like I've either made choices or life has happened to me in such a way that I don't feel like I can serve God anymore.
Disqualified.
I'm disqualified. I can't speak into that, even though I've been through that, but I went through it and made the wrong choice. So how can I say? I've heard parents say, "Well, it's not like I can tell them not to. I did the same thing." It's like that's exactly why you can tell them not to.
The outcomes.
She had been, in her mind, everything Jewish stripped away from her. Yeah. Her diet, mm-hmm. her morals. Just her code of ethics, everything, her people. Mm-hmm. I mean, she was completely taken into the king's house and made to be one of them. Even hid the fact that she was a Jew, and at this point, it probably felt like it doesn't even matter that I used to be Jewish. Nothing about me is Jewish anymore. Sure. I don't look Jewish. I don't eat Jewish. I don't talk nothing. Yeah. Nothing about me represents God anymore. And I just think of so many people that feel like that. Yeah. I can't get involved. I did this one time. I think of. Well, I don't want to go into specifics, but I just think of. you know,
and countless people.
certain moral failings that it's like,
Yeah.
I messed up, so I can't.
Yeah, welcome to the team.
Yeah,
because
I've got a whole book here that's got a lot of characters that
Sure.
pretty much all messed up.
and I think when you look at that too, the alone, I think that's part of the enemy's ploy, is to make you feel alone, to make you feel like, okay, I don't even have people anymore. Like, now she's in a good spot, right, for this situation, and in general. But at the same time, she understood, okay, God put me here, and while it might be lonely, it might feel hopeless, it might feel a desperate place of God, like removing a bunch of things in your life, whether it's whatever situation you might be in. I think what we should glean and we should try to learn, just from the principle of the text, is like, okay, even in your most vulnerable, lonely place, though the text does not specifically say God was there, look at what she asked the people around her to do, that did have a relationship with him, that knew who he was, and she still did, right? Okay, pray for me. Get on your hands and knees. Use the supports, and I think, principally as we look at how does this apply to my life? I'm not in the situation where it's okay. When you do feel in the loneliest, most desperate, hopeless places, I know for myself, dealing with some hard things even recently, and mine and my wife's life, it feels good to stay there. It's almost like I don't want people, like, I want to feel the pain. I want that desperation and that hopelessness almost feels good to stay in.
Yeah.
And you got to fight against that. And the way that I think you fight against that is not only reestablishing, wait a minute, like, God is with me. I mean, countless places that you carve out through the Bible, it's God is near the brokenhearted. Even when it feels like he's not, he is. And that's a promise.
Yeah.
So I think as Esther analyzes this situation, and Mordecai almost brings that clarity in, it's like, okay, don't think that God might not have put you in this exact position for just this moment.
Yeah.
And sometimes he has to break us to get to use us, and all of those kind of adages. So as we start analyzing, okay, what do I take from this? What do I glean from this, so that I can actually put this into play in my life? Is really ask the question, okay, wait, what are you wanting me to do, God? Do I need to reach out to the people around me? Have I been blocking those people off? Have I? So I think there's so much good stuff in here that we can use, practically in our everyday lives, even when we're not, sitting in a kingdom waiting for another person to kill our entire people. Because if we're waiting for that, I think you might be in some trouble. But
yeah, and so then we have this scene where Esther kind of sets the stage, kind of butters up the king a little bit, the whole banquet, and she kind of sets the stage so that she'll have an opportunity, because she doesn't get to just go talk to the king unless he invites her in, and so she kind of makes this place so that she'll have access to the king, and she comes with a bold request. First of all, hey, by the way, I'm Jewish. Like, that's not a small thing. And then on top of that, also your right-hand man wants to kill all of my people, starting with my uncle, who, by the way, saved your life. Remember that guy?
Yeah.
You wrote about him?
Yeah.
And obviously, God worked in that in an incredible way. The Jewish people end up with the Feast of Purim out of it to remember. And there is this newfound place in society for the Jewish people, held in much higher esteem than what they were before. But I guess I don't know where I was going with that, except just to kind of wrap up, what happens in the story.
Sure.
For those who might not be as familiar, but
yeah, I mean, Esther basically has him come feast, and then Haman's a part of it, so he's feeling good, right? He's feeling himself, and he's like,
Haman doesn't know she's Jewish either.
No, so he's like, oh man, the only person she requested is me, and then makes the gallows, and you get the irony of those are he made him for Mordecai.
Hanged
the king can't
own.
sleep. There's so many good things that if we were going chapter by chapter, you could get to. And then God delivers his people through Esther, and like you see even the king's heart, being changed. It's amazing how God this was as low as the Jewish people could probably get in exile, not where they belong, not where they're, but he's going to allow the successes and this heartbreak and tragedy, he's going to use it to elevate them, and then that is going to really end up that with them back where they're supposed to be.
Yeah, this kind of sets the stage for Nehemiah being in the king's court, and
it's crazy how it's. And again, one of the things that we try to hammer into the students every year is like, listen, you cannot judge a book by, you're 3 chapters in and you're like, oh, this is just, no one would stop there, right? No one would be like, oh man, this is, it's over. Like, let's hear the trumpets. And it's like, no, that's never how God operates. That you can't stop in chapter 3. And unfortunately, so many of us want to allow the frustrations, the angers, the difficulties, which are unfair. I mean, there's nobody that got
unfair, not your fault.
Yeah. There's no one that got a rougher hand. Well, maybe a couple people, but she got like Uriah, the Hittite comes to mind. Like, you got a pretty rough hand. But Esther, I mean, she got such a difficult hand to play. And God's like, no, I know that it feels like I've abandoned you. I know it feels like this, but you can't, I'm assuming that Randy, said this, but you can't discern spiritual things from physical things.
Yeah.
And we get so caught up in the physical things and looking at, I mean, you don't have to go far, just even now looking at the news. You turn on the news right now, it's like, this is going to all end. Jesus is coming back anytime in our minds, but it's like, listen, hold on. We can't judge the spiritual warfare that's going on based off of the physical.
Yeah.
And it's so important for us to cling to is like, okay, everything looks terrible, but where's God in the story? God, where are you? What are you calling me to do? And again, like, we're not saying that God's calling you to be the Esther, but I think there's opportunities in your life right now in quarantine, in the craziness of life, that he is going to ask you to do something that maybe is out of your comfort zone. Going to ask you to do something that says, hey man, there's an opportunity, that whether it's inviting someone to church, there's never been a time, there are hurting people, there are broken people, guess what? That's where we're all at.
Yeah. Has it ever been easier to invite someone to church?
Hey, here's a link. You don't even have to do it at the same time as me.
Are you free on? Oh wait, of course you are.
Yes. Yeah. Anytime on a Sunday, anytime on a Saturday. I mean, literally, that's. And I think. So I think as we look at the story and kind of wrap it up, and obviously we're doing an overview of the story, so we're not getting into all the nitty gritty details, but. Man, what an opportunity that God gave a random girl at the beginning of the story. And he gave her the hardest of hands.
Yeah.
But he was there. And I think even in the midst of the fog and the haze and the difficulty, I think the one thing that we can take away, God was there.
Yeah.
And he's there now. And I know that, I mean, we're talking about record unemployment, who knows some of the issues that people are dealing with. And I can't tell you everything's going to be okay. What I can tell you is that God is there.
Yeah.
And he desires to use it. And he desires to allow you to actually evaluate your life, take some personal stake in this and say, okay, God, this is the hand you've dealt me. What can I do with it? Personal responsibility, and I listen to leadership podcasts, and one of them's by a Navy SEAL, and he the top of the top Navy SEALs, and he retired, and now he goes into businesses, and he's like, the training, the leadership stuff is the same. The first thing you need to ask is, okay, God, what are you asking me to do? Whether it's leadership, whether it's being an employee, whether it's being a follower of Jesus. Okay, God, what am I responsible for?
Yeah. So. And I think it's a powerful story in serving God where you are.
Yeah, for sure.
And without rehashing everything from last week, the position that Esther was in, just it wasn't good. I mean, morally compromising is certainly the best way to put it. And she certainly did not feel like she was in a to serve God.
Yeah, for sure.
Samson, at the end of his life, he at the end of his life, I mean, good grief, you want to talk about morally compromising, but And there was, God used him even through some of his wickedness to judge Israel's enemies. But in the end, he was powerless.
Yeah.
He was powerless in and of himself, and chose to humble himself and serve God from where he was.
Yeah.
And I guess that's part of the challenge, to not feel like, well, I need to get to this place spiritually and then I can serve God.
Sure.
No, serve God from where you are. Because if you can't serve God from where you are, don't delude yourself into thinking that, if you could just get to that place, then you would serve God. Because if you won't serve him now where you are, you won't serve him then either.
Yeah, and I do love the fact that it ends in a happy ending, but there's part of me that doesn't love that. It's kind of like the Job situation.
Not always, the reality is that's not always real life.
And that's I think the sad part. You look at Job's story, and God gives him everything back twofold. But that's not the point of the story.
Right.
The point of the story is that one little verse at the end where he says, listen, I used to hear you by the hearing of my ears, but now I see you with my eyes. Like the seeing of my eyes. It's like, I used to kind of know who you were, but it took calamity, it took hardship, to make me realize, like, no, fire. You're real. Like, no, you are a real person. And it's so hard because I can't promise that, like, God's going to fix everything in your life. That's not anything that any believer should say. What I can say, it's better, like you said, with the fire. It's better to be in the fire with him than out of the fire without him. And, you know, he can do far more abundantly than anything we ask or think in the midst of a pandemic, in the midst of heartbreak and heartache. And now we have to give him the opportunity, right? And I think that's where it comes, like you said, humbling ourselves and saying, okay, I don't have all the answers.
Yeah.
If you tuned into this and thought we had all the answers,
oh man,
you're going to be pretty disappointed. But the beautiful thing is we do know who does. And
well, Devin, thanks so much for your time today.
Absolutely, man.
Can I pray for you and your ministry out there as we wrap up?
Yeah.
Heavenly Father, God, thank you so much for Devin. Thank you for the opportunity to sit down today and open your word and look at a hard lesson about serving you from where we are. Often the place we find ourselves is embarrassing. It's not as far along as we feel like maybe we should be. But God, you can always use us from wherever we are. And God, we praise you for that. That you don't hold it over our heads that we're not what we should be. You just call us to be available and faithful to you. God, I just pray for Devin, for he and his wife Caroline, as well as they lead the ministry out at Great Commission Bible Institute. I just pray that you would bless that, especially as they kind of figure out what next year is going to look like. I know a lot of things with schools all over are kind of up in the air, and we just pray that they would trust you. We know that you have all that worked out, and we know that it is your plan for people to study your word and learn it. And I just pray that you would show them how. Great Commission Bible Institute will be part of that in the coming year. Thank you again, in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Thanks for watching.